It had been exactly 9 months since the divorce papers were signed, and still I avoided mirrors. Not because I was ashamed of my reflection, but because every time I saw my face, I saw the woman he had walked away from. My name is Clara, and I am 38 years old. I used to be a wife, a partner, someone's forever. Now I was the divorcee, a title whispered behind hands at family gatherings. When I got the invitation to my younger sister Bethany's wedding, I knew attending would be hard. Bethany and I had always had tension. She was the golden child, the beautiful one, the one who'd never had to try too hard. I was the responsible one, the steady one. I'd built a marriage, a home, a life, until it crumbled. I thought about not going. I even drafted a polite excuse. But then I thought about appearances. How skipping the wedding would be used as proof of how unstable I'd become. And worst of all, I knew my mother would never let it go. So I booked a salon appointment, curled my hair, and zipped myself into a navy blue dress that fit just tight enough to remind me I was still here, still trying. The ceremony was held at an old estate in Virginia. White columns, sprawling gardens, and the kind of tented reception you only see in magazines. Bethany had spared no expense. As I walked toward the aisle, I caught a glimpse of her through the crowd, laughing with her bridesmaids, radiant and perfect. No one saw me arrive. No one offered me a seat. I sat alone near the back. During the ceremony, I kept my smile glued in place. I clapped when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. I rose for the couple's exit, then quietly stepped toward the cocktail area. That's when I heard my name. Clara! I turned. My mother, Judith, approached with a martini in one hand and judgment in her eyes. She kissed the air beside my cheek. You look tired, darling, she said, but at least you came. That was the beginning. Later, at the reception, I would learn just how deep the cruelty could cut. But in that moment, all I felt was the familiar sting of being noticed just to be diminished. I nodded, excused myself, and walked toward the bathroom, clutching my purse as if it were a shield. I didn't cry. Not yet. That would come later, when the speeches started. Dinner was served beneath a white silk canopy dotted with fairy lights, with tables arranged in perfect symmetry. I found my name on a place card at the far end, near the speaker system, but away from the bridal table. The overflow table, as my cousin Greg used to call it. I was seated next to distant relatives I hadn't seen since high school, and a couple whose names I couldn't even recall. I smiled politely and sipped my wine, feeling more like an accessory than a guest. The toasts began just after the plated entrees were cleared. Bethany's maid of honor, a blonde named Candace who'd built a career on Instagram, went first. She gushed about how Bethany was the most loyal, radiant woman I've ever known, and how, from the moment she met Adam, we all knew she'd found her forever. That word, forever, landed heavy. Then, my mother took the microphone. Judith adjusted her designer shawl, held up her wine glass, and began. To my beautiful daughter Bethany, you were always the light in every room, always made us laugh. So bright, so full of life. And now, you've found a man who sees it too. She paused, then glanced in my direction. And I know not everyone finds that kind of love. Some marriages fall apart. Sometimes people just aren't meant to be wives. But Bethany, she was born for it. A few guests chuckled softly. My throat tightened. I looked down at my lap, gripping the cloth napkin until my knuckles turned white. She continued unfazed. I always said one daughter inherited my grace, and the other, well, she inherited my stubbornness. The laughter came louder this time. Judith smiled as though she'd delivered a charming punchline. I felt like someone had yanked the air from my lungs. And then Bethany stood up. I just want to add, she said, taking the mic from our mother. That watching my sister go through her divorce taught me one thing: if you don't bring value to the table, don't be surprised when you're not invited to stay. There were gasps, a few uncomfortable laughs, a wave of silence. My hands trembled under the table. I could feel eyes on me, curious, pitiful, entertained. I tried to form a smile, something to show I wasn't crushed, that I was strong. But it wouldn't come. Bethany's groom, Adam, reached for the microphone next. I barely looked up. I was preparing to excuse myself, maybe retreat to the restroom until dessert passed. But his voice cut through the quiet, firm and clear. "I'm so sorry for what they've done." Heads turned. The air shifted. "I didn't know this was going to happen," he said. "And Clara," he turned to me, his expression serious, "you didn't deserve any of it." It was the first time anyone had said my name with kindness that day. I stared at him, stunned. Bethany's mouth dropped open. Judith narrowed her eyes. And I sat there, still and small, wondering what he meant by that. For a moment, no one moved. It was as if time had paused, forks midair, glasses half raised, mouths caught open. Adam's words hung above us like fog that refused to lift. Bethany's fingers clutched the edge of the sweetheart table. Her smile, polished, calculated, twitched. She tried to laugh it off. "Oh, Adam's just being sweet. He hates awkward silences." But he wasn't smiling. He leaned into the mic again. "No, Bethany, that wasn't sweet. That was mean and cruel. And you all laughed like it was entertainment." I could feel my face burning, not from shame this time, but confusion. Why would he do this? He didn't even know me. We'd barely spoken. Judith stood abruptly, her chair screeching against the floor. "Well, that's enough. This is a wedding, not a therapy session." She gave a sharp clap and motioned to the DJ, who fumbled to restart the music. I took that as my cue. Quietly, I slipped away from the table and out of the tent, onto the gravel path behind the gardens. I didn't want pity. I didn't want stares. I just needed air. Behind me, the music swelled again. Frank Sinatra, something slow. I walked past rose bushes and lanterns, down to the little koi pond Bethany had insisted be illuminated for Siath aesthetic. My heels sank into the grass. I sat on the edge of a stone bench and let the night swallow the rest of the tears I had held back during dinner. Then I heard footsteps. "Clara?" I turned. Adam stood a few feet away, jacket off, tie loose. He looked different now, less groom, more man. "I didn't mean to make things worse," he said, "but I couldn't sit there and watch that happen." I was silent for a beat too long. "Why?" I finally asked. He sighed. "Because I know what it's like to be made into someone's punching bag. And I saw your face when they laughed. It reminded me of my sister. She used to get that same look when our dad would cut her down in front of people." His eyes were kind, honest. "I don't know what your story is," he continued, "but I could see the way Bethany and Judith treated you. That's not love. That's performance." I swallowed hard. No one had ever spoken that plainly about my family before. "Thank you," I said quietly. "I don't think anyone's ever defended me like that. Not in public, at least." He gave a faint smile. "They should have. You deserved better." We sat in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that feels like a balm, not a burden. Then, from across the lawn, Bethany's voice pierced the quiet. "Adam?" It wasn't sweet. It wasn't playful. It was sharp. "I should go," he said, rising, "but I meant what I said." As he disappeared into the darkness, I sat still, unsure of whether to feel grateful or alarmed, because Adam had just married my sister. And yet, in that one brief moment, I felt more seen by him than I had in my entire marriage. The following morning, I woke to a text from Bethany. "Thanks for making the wedding awkward. Hope you're proud of yourself. Please leave before noon." No, "Good morning." No, "Thank you for coming." just a final slap to the face, digitally delivered. I packed my things in silence. I hadn't brought much, just one overnight bag and a small dress bag. I zipped them slowly, half waiting for an apology that would never come. Before I left the hotel, I glanced in the mirror. My eyes were puffy, but I straightened my back anyway. I would not be broken by these women again. At the front desk, I checked out without fanfare. I considered asking the receptionist to hold my bags so I could get a coffee nearby. But I couldn't risk another run-in with my mother, or, worse, Bethany. Instead, I started walking. The air was crisp for a summer morning, and the silence helped. By the time I got home, 4 hours and 2 bus transfers later, I tossed my phone onto the couch and collapsed beside it. I didn't want to look at photos of the wedding on social media. I didn't want to hear from anyone who'd been there. But the silence didn't last long. 2 days later, my phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. "Hey Clara, I hope this isn't too weird. It's Adam." I stared at the screen. "I just wanted to say I meant what I said. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." He shouldn't have sent that. He was married. But I couldn't deny the way my stomach twisted when I saw his name. I didn't reply. Not then. Instead, I let the silence grow between us, hoping that if I didn't water it, nothing would bloom. But Bethany, it seemed, had other things blooming in her mind. A week later, my friend Monica invited me to lunch. We'd been close since college, and she was one of the few people who knew the truth about my marriage. Over Caesar salads, she leaned in and asked, "So, Bethany's wedding?" I gave a tight smile. "A disaster," she nodded. "She's been posting all over her stories. But not about Adam. All solo shots. Hashtag self-love, independent woman, that kind of thing." My brow furrowed. "Seriously?" She even posted a quote yesterday, something like, "Better alone than next to someone who makes you feel alone." Monica raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay with them?" I didn't know how to answer. I hadn't told Monica about the text from Adam. I hadn't told anyone. Part of me wanted to delete it, pretend it never happened. But another part, one I wasn't ready to admit aloud, kept rereading it before bed. Later that night, I finally responded. "Hi, thanks for your message. I appreciate you standing up for me. It meant more than you know." He replied within minutes. "Anytime. Seriously, I know family can be hard." Then another. "I hope this doesn't sound strange, but you remind me of someone strong, even if you don't see it yet." I closed the chat before I could say something I'd regret. Because the truth was, I hadn't felt strong in a very long time. The days blurred together after that. I threw myself into work. Quiet, solitary freelance editing for a company that never asked too many questions. I lived in a small apartment with creaky floors and good lighting, and for the most part, it felt safe. But I couldn't stop thinking about Adam. Not in the way a woman thinks about a man she desires, but in the way someone revisits a moment that doesn't quite make sense. His words, his tone, that flicker of something behind his eyes. Was it empathy? Was it recognition? Or was it something neither of us could name? I needed clarity, not just about Adam, but about everything. So I did something I hadn't done since my divorce. I called my ex-husband. His name was Peter. He answered on the third ring, surprised but civil. "Clara?" he said. "Wow, it's been a while." We hadn't spoken in nearly a year. The silence between us hadn't been bitter. It had been sterile, like a door quietly closed and never reopened. "I'm not calling to talk about us," I said. I need to remember who I was when we ended." Peter was quiet for a moment. Then, "You were tired, worn out, not just by me, by everything." I sank into the couch. "Did you ever love me?" Another pause. "Yes," he said, "but I didn't know how to love you the way you needed." There it was. No theatrics, no apologies, just truth. We talked for a few more minutes about his new job, his move to Colorado. He didn't mention anyone new in his life, and I didn't ask. When we hung up, I didn't cry. I thought I would. But instead, I felt like I had just returned a book to the library. A chapter closed. A weight lifted. That night, I found myself scrolling through Bethany's social media, despite everything in me telling me not to. There she was, posing in white linen by a vineyard, sipping champagne, tagged at a solo wellness retreat. No Adam, no mention of him, not even a ring on her finger in the photos. And then something unexpected. A tagged post. Not from Bethany, but from a woman I didn't know. A casual photo taken at a restaurant. Bethany, mid-laugh, seated next to a man. Not Adam. My heart thumped. I zoomed in. The man had a tan and broad shoulders. His hand rested on the back of Bethany's chair, not in a platonic way. I didn't know what shocked me more, that she was already spending time with another man, or that she didn't seem to care who saw it. 2 minutes later, another text from Adam. I've been thinking a lot about what I said at the wedding. It wasn't just about you. It was about everything I've ignored since I met her. I stared at the screen. I'm sorry, he added. I just needed to say that to someone who might understand. I didn't respond. I couldn't, because deep down, I did understand. The next morning, I found myself rereading Adam's last message. I told myself it was just concern, just unfinished thoughts from a man in a troubled marriage. But I knew better. What I didn't expect was to hear from Bethany. Not a text, not a call, a knock at my door. It was late afternoon. I'd just gotten out of the shower and hadn't bothered to dress properly. I peeked through the peephole and froze. Bethany. She stood outside my apartment with sunglasses too large for her face and a shopping bag slung over one arm like it weighed nothing. Her mouth was tight, chin tilted, like she'd practiced her expression before knocking. I opened the door slowly. Well, she said, aren't you going to invite me in? I stepped aside without a word, letting her glide past me as if she owned the place. This is cozy, she said, her voice coated in something bitter. I crossed my arms. Why are you here, Bethany? She dropped the bag on my kitchen counter. To talk, obviously. I said nothing. She sighed dramatically, as if I were the one being difficult. I know you've been talking to Adam, she said. Don't bother denying it. I saw his messages. He's been distant, and when I checked his phone, there it was. Your name. She didn't sound angry. She sounded afraid. I didn't say anything inappropriate, I replied carefully. And he reached out to me. Bethany laughed, short and dry. Of course he did. Men always go for the ones who seem broken. You know that better than anyone. My stomach turned. She looked around the room, avoiding my gaze. It's not working. The marriage. There it was. The admission. I tried to do everything right, she continued. I planned the perfect wedding. I got the house, the ring, the followers. And still, he pulls away. You think it's easy, being me? I stared at her, stunned by the question. You humiliated me in front of 200 people, I said quietly. You and Mom made me feel like garbage. And now you want sympathy because your life isn't playing out like your Instagram grid? For a moment, her facade cracked. Her bottom lip trembled. I didn't mean to hurt you, she whispered. I didn't believe her, not fully, but I saw something I hadn't seen before. Fear, not of me, of being alone. Bethany reached for the shopping bag and pulled out a small box. She placed it on my table. What is that? A dress, she said. From the wedding. You left it at the hotel. I thought you might want it back. I stared at the box. It felt like a bribe, a guilt offering. She turned to leave, but paused at the door. Whatever you think Adam is, he's not who he seems. He doesn't stay with women who disappoint him. And then she was gone. I stood there, heart racing, the box untouched, the air heavy with implication. I didn't know who Adam really was, but I was beginning to realize I didn't know Bethany either. I didn't open the box for 2 days. It sat on my dining table like a silent witness, daring me to touch it. I walked around it, cleaned under it, moved it slightly to the side when I sat down to eat, but I didn't lift the lid. I was afraid of what it meant if I did. Instead, I busied myself with work, with errands, with anything that didn't involve my sister or her husband or the growing knot in my chest. I thought I could outrun the feelings, but feelings have a way of waiting for you to sit still. On the third night, I found myself at the window, watching the empty street below, phone in hand. The message thread with Adam was still open. I hadn't written anything new since Bethany's visit. I wasn't sure what I wanted to say, if anything. But then the notification came. I think she knows I've been talking to you. She's acting strange, distant, but also scared. I stared at the screen. I'm sorry, he added a minute later. I shouldn't be dragging you into this. And finally, you deserve peace, Clara. Not more chaos. I set the phone down and finally lifted the lid on the box. Inside was the navy dress I'd worn to the wedding. It had been dry cleaned, folded neatly, and wrapped in tissue paper. There was no note. I held the fabric in my hands, then pressed it against my chest. It was just a dress, but somehow it felt heavier now. The next day, Monica called. She was at a local cafe and asked if I wanted to join her. I said yes, grateful for the distraction, and threw on a cardigan. Over cappuccinos, she studied me the way only old friends can. You look like someone who's trying very hard not to look like anything at all. I laughed weakly. That obvious? She nodded. You know you can tell me, right? So I did. Not everything, but enough. About Bethany. About Adam's texts. About the wedding and the humiliation and the strange twist things had taken since. Monica was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Do you know what I think? I braced myself. I think you're being pulled into something that doesn't belong to you. And the Clara I know, she doesn't follow other people's messes. She fixes her own. That hit harder than I expected. After lunch, I walked home slowly. Every step felt like a question. Every memory of Adam's voice, Bethany's tears, my mother's disdain, echoed louder in my mind. That night, I texted Adam. No more messages. Whatever's happening between you and Bethany, you need to figure it out without me in the middle. I wish you both peace. He didn't respond right away. But when he finally did, the words made my blood run cold. She's not who you think she is, Clara. She never was. And you'll see soon enough. 3 days passed. No messages. No unexpected knocks. No veiled threats or boxed apologies. I went for walks again. Cleaned out my closet. Cooked dinner from scratch instead of microwaving leftovers. For the first time in what felt like months, I began to feel like myself again. Quietly healing. Slowly stitching the torn parts of my life back together. And then the email came. Subject line. Urgent. Wedding photographer follow-up. I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. But the sender's name caught my eye. Oliver Dunn. He was the wedding photographer. I remembered his name from the place cards at the vendor table. I opened it. Hi, Clara. I hope this isn't intrusive, but I wanted to reach out directly. I've just finished editing the photos from Bethany and Adam's wedding. There's one in particular you should see. I didn't feel comfortable sending it in the main gallery. Best? Oliver, my pulse quickened. A separate attachment sat beneath the message. One JPEG file, labeled DSC_0472. I hesitated, hovered my cursor, then clicked. The photo opened slowly, as if aware of its own weight. It was taken after the speeches, during that brief, confusing silence before the music resumed. In the foreground, I sat at my table, half-turned, visibly shaken. My hands were clasped tightly in my lap. But behind me, just out of focus, was Adam. And he wasn't looking at Bethany. He was looking at me. Not just looking, staring, focused, unflinching. A gaze that said everything without a single word. I closed the image and stood up, heart pounding. What was I supposed to do with that? Was it a moment of empathy, curiosity, something else? I didn't want to know. But by the next morning, the photo had gone viral. Not the version I received. A cropped one. Just Adam, mid-toast, with his eyes locked on someone out of frame. It was posted by a guest with the caption, "When the groom's eyes say what his vows don't." By noon, wedding gossip blogs had picked it up. By evening, it had been reshared over 200,000 times. I got a text from Monica. "Clara, is that photo about you?" I didn't answer. Then, a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, but the message was short and chilling. Bethany. "You think you're innocent in all this? Just wait, Clara. You have no idea what he's capable of." I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Adam's stare. Not the one in the photo. This one was colder, calculated. A version I'd imagined, twisted by Bethany's warning and the silence that followed. By morning, my inbox was full. Tabloid inquiries, a podcast host asking for an interview, a gossip blog wanting my side of the story. I ignored them all. But one message stood out. It was from a woman named Lisa Grant. The subject line read, Adam Whitaker, please read." "I've been where you are." Her words were careful, measured. She said she'd seen the photo, that she knew Adam, that once she'd been engaged to him. They broke up quietly, without scandal, but not without damage. "He's charming," she wrote, "until he decides you're inconvenient." Her final line made my hands tremble. "He doesn't leave scars you can see." But that doesn't mean they don't exist. Before I could respond, my phone rang. This time, it wasn't Bethany. It was my mother. "Clara," she snapped without greeting, "what have you done?" "I haven't done anything." "Bethany is hysterical. She says you're trying to destroy her marriage, that you've always been jealous of her, that you plotted this from the start." "She sent me the dress," I said, voice cracking. "She came to my apartment. She started this." "She's your sister." "I know," I said softly, "and I've spent my whole life paying for that." Judith hung up without another word. I stared at the phone. I wasn't afraid of Bethany anymore, but I was starting to fear the truth. I didn't plan to speak at the brunch. Bethany had invited our mother, a few family friends, and a couple of bridesmaids for what she called damage control. Her marriage was unraveling, the internet was circling, and she was desperate to reclaim her image. I went because I was tired of hiding. When I walked into the restaurant, every conversation paused. Judith didn't look at me. Bethany's face was blank, except for her eyes, which were lit with something that looked like fury barely held together by mascara. I sat down quietly. Bethany stood to give her little speech. She thanked everyone for their support, claimed everything was fine, and that the media had twisted a family moment into something unrecognizable. Then she looked at me. "Clara," she said sweetly, "do you have anything you'd like to add?" I stood. My voice didn't shake. "I just want to say," I began, "that I'm done being the easy one to blame. You made a joke of my divorce in front of 200 people. You invited me here knowing you wanted to humiliate me again. And for years, I let you, but not anymore." Someone gasped. Someone else dropped a fork. "I didn't steal your husband, Bethany. You lost him on your own." I turned to Judith. "And you?" "You watched it all and did nothing." You raised two daughters, one to be adored, the other to be tolerated. I hope you're proud. Then I took out my phone, opened the email from Lisa, and placed it on the table in front of Bethany. I think you should read this, and then think very carefully about what kind of man you married. And I walked out. I didn't look back. Not when Bethany called after me. Not when Judith slammed her glass down. Not when a stunned silence fell behind me, like a curtain closing on a play. Outside, the sky was gray, but the air felt new, fresh. I didn't have all the answers, but I had my name back, and no one was going to rewrite my story again.